Hi, and welcome to 4 at 4 Forum. I'm Joe Garner, and we are so glad you've joined us here today, especially if you've been thinking about writing a book. If there was ever a time to get serious about writing a book, now would be that time. I mean, there are two ways for us to look at the COVID environment, either with dread or doubt, or seeing it as a time of opportunity and transformation. And writing a book can become the catalyst to change your life and career. I know it was for me. You know, there's one thing that I and my co-panelists and you have in common. There was a time when we all just thought about writing a book, about doing a book. But today we'll share with you how we put that thought into action so that you can take similar steps into becoming an author yourself. So let me introduce you to our panelists. I have a terrific writer, somebody that I've actually worked with before. His name is Michael Ashley. Michael?
Hey, thank you for being here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Michael.
Thank you, Joe. It's good to be here. Good to see you all. So I am a best-selling author and a ghostwriter. I own the creative content company called Ink Wordsmiths, and we specialize in writing books for our clients. And in the last 5 years, we've written 26 books for our clients. 4 of them have been bestsellers, and they cover a range of subjects. And I'm also proud to say that I've worked on 2 books with you, Joe. One of them was It's Saturday Morning, in which we got a Ford from Howie Mandel. Yeah. And we recently sold a nonfiction book about the art and science of routine that will be coming out in May of next year.
Correct. And let me introduce our next panelist. And she was actually a client of yours, Michael, I believe, Anita Kay. Anita?
Good afternoon. It's great to be here. Thanks, Joe. Hi, Michael.
Good to see you.
Anita, tell us about yourself.
Great. So I worked with Michael Ashley for about 3 years and launched a book called Behaving Bravely, How to Mind Shift Life's Challenges. That was released in 2019. And I'm a resident of Southern California in Orange County, and I'm a certified life coach and career coach. Love what I do.
Wonderful. Well, you know, 4 at 4, there's usually a fourth. Well, we sort of see the fourth being you. So we're glad you've joined us. You know, I think we can all agree the first step is to truly understand why you want to write a book. Writing a book probably won't be the hardest thing you've done in your life, but I can promise you it won't be the easiest either. But whether with a clear and strong understanding of the why that you're doing the book, that will keep you focused and motivated. I think that's been my experience personally, and I think yours too. Anita, why did you write your book?
Well, we spend so long looking outward to everyone else. And by the time we're ready to kind of tune in and check in, it's hard. And my why was almost twofold. I wanted to share my story and that of many of my clients and how they journeyed to behaving bravely in their own trials and tribulations. And I think the second part was from a professional standpoint, you know, as a life coach, to give back and to share content and to educate others on how they can be behaving bravely and building, you know, lion-like courage and resiliency.
Right. So it was all about helping your own business and having a differentiator, I would imagine.
I think so, Joe, definitely. And, you know, I didn't always dream about writing a book. You know, it probably wasn't until well into my the last 5 years that it really dawned on me. And like you said earlier, it takes a lot of thoughts. And I think the individuals and the authors that really execute on putting a product in front of them and starting a book or whether they're finishing a book, it's got to really come from your why. And that why's got to be really powerful. And it's really personal. I know it was really personal for me, almost to a point where that why was bigger than myself. And I knew that writing a book and putting it out in the marketplace was going to be really beneficial for others.
Right. Well, I can say for myself, I didn't even know I had aspirations to be an author until I came up with the idea for what became my first book. And in fact, when I sort of confide in friends and family that I was thinking about writing a book, my oldest friend said to me, "Don't you think you ought to try reading one before you write?" But I also subscribe to this: the good Lord looks out for the ignorant, the persistent, and the trick is to be the right mix of both. So that's what I did. And to make a very long story short, I just decided that it was a book I wanted to own. And I didn't know the first thing about the publishing business. I mean, nothing. But I'd always been a collector. The book was about broadcast history. So I pulled a book off my shelf, looked at the name of the publisher, and I cold called them. And that cold call led to the next one and the next one. And I kept getting rejection after rejection until my path finally led me to a little publisher in Naperville, Illinois, not exactly the hub of the publishing business. But she felt my passion. She knew that this book was something that was coming from my heart and my soul, and she took a gamble on it. We put the book out in October, to make a very long story short. And by December, it hit the New York Times bestsellers list and just changed the whole course of my life. So that's why I say that, we can relate to you if you're wanting to do a book and you're like, gee, I don't know. I mean, Michael, tell me about some of the people that you work with. What by and large do you find is their why?
Sure. Well, I think it can break down into two things. One could be a legacy book. It could be a book about a person's life story, an autobiography, because people have really amazing stories, and I can definitely attest to hearing some of those tremendous stories. But the other reason is probably a little bit bigger, which is from a business perspective. If you want to be established as a thought leader, as an expert in your field, the best way to do so is to differentiate yourself through a book. And I often say things like this: if you're a lawyer, especially in Orange County where I live, there are many lawyers in Orange County. How are you gonna define yourself? How are you gonna differentiate yourself from your competition? There may be a lot of lawyers out there, but how many of them have written a book? And I'll give you an example of this. Not too long ago, I wrote a book for my lawyer client friend, and he's also a sports agent. And so he led a very interesting life. For most of his childhood, he was in and out of juvenile hall detention centers. You would never know that to meet this guy these days, because he looks very put together, but he had a very interesting and tumultuous childhood. But he wanted to connect with his clientele, and a lot of them come from at-risk households. And so in order to do that, he wrote this book with me, and it tells his story and shows that he's just like them. And so if they have a choice between working with someone who hasn't lived that experience and working with Kurt, they're going to definitely choose to work with Kurt. Plus, it doesn't hurt that he was on Inside Edition after writing the book together with me, and that definitely helped his career as well.
So it resonated with the audience out there then. It was his authenticity in his true story. There are so many key elements that we know that go into writing a book. So Michael, when you're working with a client, how do you get started? That's the hard part. That's the thing I hear from everybody is I just don't know how to get started.
Well, it's a good question. I think that can be very daunting. If you're looking at that blank page, even if it's digitally, it can be very daunting. You may not want to do it at all. And it is hard to get started. But what I would say is, like you once said to me, is just to get going. But if you're going to work with a professional, I think the first thing is the discovery section. And so you and I have experienced this with working with clients, which is you can think about it like a lawyer does in this discovery session, where we're on a fact-finding mission. And what I find is through interviews, whether the two examples I brought up, whether it's telling a legacy story about someone's life that they've lived, or telling a story about someone's business, there's a lot of information to be gained. And I can personally say, as a former reporter, newspaper reporter, that it comes down to asking the right questions. And I know that you have this experience too from working with Jeff Gordon, that you ask questions about their life or about what they know best, which is their business. And
people all have a story. And it's just about getting them to tune into that, right?
It is. And with experience, which I know you have as well, you begin to ask those right questions. If you're asking those right questions, you get them to open up and tell about the really interesting stuff, the juicy stuff. And with my background in film writing and going to film school, is to always look for the conflict. If you have conflict, if you have stakes in those stories, you know that people are going to gravitate towards them. It's no accident that we watch things like Keeping Up with the Kardashians. They are infused with conflict. So if you can bring that conflict into the story of the book, well, then people are naturally going to want to read those stories. They make it into a page turner.
Right. So it's discovery, it's brainstorming. But then the one thing that, I know has to happen, because otherwise you can just find yourself going every place. And that is the outline.
Yes.
Anita, maybe you want to come on here because I know that Michael worked with you a great deal on your outline.
Yes, an outline is absolutely critical. It's absolutely critical. It actually, I think, how to describe it, it kind of signals your story of kind of where you need to research, how to stay organized on your vision of your story, and get to that ultimate goal. It helped me construct my ideas, stay organized, with the goal of having that thoughtful flow. So it really basically lays the groundwork. There are definitely different types of approaches to take, but I think the outlining was absolutely key. It was kind of like, that envelope unraveling, and you can kind of see and put your vision together. Mm-hmm. So if anyone's like me, where they're on top of trying to stay organized and understand from the start to the beginning, what's this going to look like? Does this make sense? Does this speak to me? And having that counterpart, I look at Michael Ashley when I worked with him as my writing coach. We all need one. And I think he was absolutely correct. It was having someone on the other side of that desk, that other side of that phone, that video, and just brainstorming and really having someone, in your background, really saying, yes, this makes sense, and being open to that constructive criticism. But outlining is really, really critical. If not, once I brainstormed and put a lot of my ideas down on paper and then had several interviews, the outlining was really that next step and was a big foundational component.
So now you got the outline, and you've got your ideas, you've brainstormed, you've done the interviews. Now you have to write it. Write it and you have to edit it. And I think that, I know for me, I couldn't have done it without editors. And I think most of the great authors, Michael, you and I were talking about that earlier. Talk about some of the authors that people have tremendous respect for, but they didn't do it alone.
You're absolutely right. I think if you look at someone like Jack Kerouac, who wrote my favorite book, which is On the Road, when he turned that manuscript into the publisher, it was just jumbled thoughts. He wrote it in a large spree of just pure writing. And the editor helps bring that to fruition. Even with Harper Lee, with her novel, To Kill a Mockingbird, it was really a collaboration. It was a meeting of the minds. So when I think about writing and creating books, it's often believed to be one person that's producing that book, but it's really a concert. It's a group of people putting together something almost like a film, if you think about it that way. And one more thing I want to bring up about the outline. To me, an outline is like a blueprint to building a house. You wouldn't just start building a house without knowing where everything goes. And that's really the benefit of an outline. The more thorough you can be with an outline, the better the book that you're going to ultimately produce.
Wow. Okay, well, now that we have our proposal or a finished manuscript, what do you do next, Michael? It's a decision, and we've only got a couple of minutes before we take our first break. So let's talk about the pros and cons of self-publishing versus going for a traditional publisher.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think when it comes to self-publishing, you can definitely get higher royalties. Amazon pays better royalties than the traditional publishers. But at the same time, if you go to a traditional publisher, you have the cachet of saying, I'm with Simon & Schuster or any other type of publisher. But you can expect a lower royalty amount. You can expect that they're going to have their own opinion as to what goes into the ultimate book. Ultimately, I think it depends on you. People like Tim Ferriss have had a huge success in their lives by self-publishing. Other people have built entire businesses through self-publishing. On the other side of the issue, when it comes to traditional publishing, it looks really, really good to say that you have a book with a traditional publisher. For instance, I did a book for my client recently. McGraw-Hill published it. We launched it at the United Nations. And it's been since translated into 3 languages and actually won an award as one of the top business books in 2019. I know for sure that we would not have been entered into that category if we didn't have a traditional book publishing deal.
Right.
So even though you stand to make more money from self-publishing and you have more control, there's a perception involved when you get a traditional publishing deal.
Right. And Anita, in just 30 seconds or so, the benefit of self-publishing too is that you have the material, the content that you've created is for the book, but it's also for so much else. What are some of the things that you can tick off quickly that you've been able to repurpose some of your content for?
Oh, definitely. I would say for a lot of media or multimedia streams. So I've taken content and been able to, access additional writings with a lot of the content from my book for national magazines that I've contributed on, television shows, podcasts, my life coaching lessons that I share with my clients, social media. So it's a multitude of opportunity where you have full leverage and full control, where you wouldn't otherwise if you were going with a traditional publisher. So I think there's pros and cons with both, but the self-publishing I knew from the get-go was definitely the stand I wanted to take. But I would recommend doing your due diligence, because every author has an ultimate goal for their manuscript. So it really kind of depends on them. But I have no regrets doing the self-publishing. And yeah, Amazon's going to be your best friend, and they do a fantastic job.
That's awesome. I hope the information we've given you so far is helpful. We've got more to come, but right now we want to take a musical break. And I'd like to introduce our musical director, Paul Piazza, who's going to introduce our great musical artist. Paul?
Hey, Joe, fantastic conversation so far. Love every minute of it. Well, as you know, literature is an ancient art form. It's undergoing revolutions and innovations, and so is classical music. Niv Ashkenazi and Leah Cohen, our next guests, are two artists who don't let traditional boundaries stop them from touching audiences musically. They met in New York at the Juilliard School and are both teaching and performing throughout the Southland, performing together as the duo Dyad. So, Niv and Leah, what are you playing for us first?
We're going to be playing for you a short excerpt from Danse Macabre by Camille Cesson. This is actually a tone poem telling the story of the devil who is raising the dead to come and dance and play until sunrise. So it's especially
spooky, Halloween themed.
Halloween. Yes.
That was wonderful. Great. And we get to see them again here in just a little while. So to sum up, now you put in the hard work. First of all, you've made the decision that you're going to do a book, and that's great. You got to take that first big step. And then you've gone through all the hard work, and now we can talk about some of the benefits and the results. And I'd like to bring on my panelists, Michael and Anita. And Michael, I've shared this story with you before, but I got really, really lucky on my first book. And I'll never forget when I got the word that that it got to be a New York Times bestseller. I was actually in Chicago, and I was there to do a signing. And I recall being in my hotel room, and I was there all by myself, and I was getting showered, and all of a sudden I hear this knock, knock, knock on the door. And I thought, well, I'm not expecting anybody. I got to get ready. I got to get out of here. And I looked through the peephole, and there was a bellman with a tray and a bucket of champagne. And so I quickly put on some clothes, and I opened up the door, and I said, I'm sorry, you must have the wrong room. I didn't order any champagne. And they said, well, this was ordered for you by Source Books. And on the champagne, next to the champagne bucket was a card that said, congratulations, you're a New York Times bestselling author. And I tell you what, it almost, it gets me even to this day, because, I didn't get into it to do that. So I thought, well, this is kind of a wasted moment. I've got to celebrate it somehow. So I went to the window and I opened up the shades, and there's the city of Chicago, and I popped the cork and I poured a glass and I toasted the city of Chicago to my getting the New York Times bestseller. So those are some of the things that can happen. And I know, Michael, you and I have both been working with a client who was wanting to get a book published, and we had some great results.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really exciting when that happens. So Joe and I have been working with a client, I think, for a little bit more than a year. And the book is all about the subject of routine. In fact, it's called Routineology. And we were in the process of taking the book to different publishers. And then all of a sudden, COVID-19 happened. And this was, about February when we were talking. Actually, sorry, this was March. We were going through all this disruption. And you and I both made the decision that, look, if this book is about the importance of routine and structure in your life, there is nothing more disruptive, nor has there ever been probably in the course of human history, than COVID-19. And so why not bring that into the book? And so over a period of months, you and I rewrote the first chapter and called it March Madness, and talking about the way that
your idea, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It upended everyone's lives. And so we rewrote that first chapter and then retailored the rest of the material, took it to back to market. And I'm happy to report that a division of Simon & Schuster called Skyhorse Publishing is publishing that book early next year. And I can easily say that our client was very happy by this. I mean, it's wonderful when something like that happens, when it comes to fruition. And those are the kinds of successes that can happen. And if you wanted to be a writer, if you wanted to be published, that's wonderful when these opportunities arise.
Yeah. And Anita, you've had some really good things that have come from since you published your book. You want to share some of those?
Yes. Oh, I'd love to. I'm in sheer gratitude. The vision of why I really wanted to write a book, like I had said earlier, was to leverage my story on my clients and as a way to help as a coach to others strengthen their courage through my 5-step, in a self-management approach. But developing a book is great for entrepreneurs like myself, change agents, thought leaders. It can ultimately give you expert status, more credibility. And I think it's really established me in my profession, not only enhanced my brand, but it's giving me so much personal value to give back in a larger way through platforms. So since 2019 in July, when I launched the book, I went full-fledged on marketing aspects because I really thought it was important. And now we're in a whole different climate that we never expected. And I think behaving bravely and talking about courage is really the theme for all of us right now. And I'm grateful to share my platform on about half a dozen TV shows now, and about a dozen, national syndicated radio shows, podcast shows, and then offering content in a lot of national magazines. So it's really more about having the platform and really giving back in a big way where I can really hit a bottom line with individuals. And that was basically my why. So that in itself is a dream come true. So I'm really grateful about that. But the benefits can be endless depending on what's your goal.
Yeah, and it makes a great calling card for a business too. I mean, as you said, it really establishes you as a thought leader, as an expert and so forth. And, it's people get concerned about, well, how am I going to sell my book? Where am I going to sell my book? And I think that people, if they take a little time and they start looking at things like, well, what associations do I belong to? What what networking groups that I belong to? Michael, I know that you belong to Provisors, and I think that that has been instrumental in not only your business, but in also marketing books and things.
Yeah, I mean, you and I had a situation where we were working on a book not too long ago, and the publisher said that the best way that you can sell a book is not going on the Today Show, which surprised me.
It used to be,
right?
Yeah,
Is actually doing public speaking. And I can say in my own personal life that not only do I write books for other people, I write my own books, and I've done a lot of public speaking improvisers, like you mentioned, but a lot of different organizations. And first of all, it's a great way to sell books. But I think it's really important to think about it this way. So often when people come to me and they want to write a book, I say to them, it's not that you make the money by book sales, it's selling through the book. And I think Anita can attest to this. It's what you do with the book. And I'll give you an example. I have a client that I wrote a book for who is in the marketing space. He's done infomercials very successfully for 3 decades and counting. But he wanted to go somewhere else with his career. He wanted to establish a platform online in terms of creating video content and to give him that authority status. And what we did was we wrote a book together. We had a big name, write the forward, write the endorsement, and he was able to create an entire video brand that was around the book. It gave him that perception that he was looking for. And so I would say that, yes, if you're a part of an organization that you can speak at, or if there are other organizations that you can speak at with that, is wonderful. And the value, although there are not a lot of wonderful things about COVID, I can say one great thing is you're able to speak more remotely. In my own life, I'm speaking next month in Atlanta. Last month, I spoke in Seattle.
Now, wait a second, you're going to Atlanta to speak?
Through Zoom.
Through Zoom, okay.
So that's the thing, it's remote. So maybe I could have flown there beforehand and done the speech, but now with Zoom, and for people that are professional authors, that whole market is opened up because people want to hear people speak, and you can do it remotely.
Absolutely. One more question, just to go back, because we talked about the various steps. And again, like I said, people always say to me, I just don't know how to get started. And one of the things that I encourage them to do is just fundamentally just start. It doesn't matter if you sequenced it correctly. It doesn't matter if you're grammatically correct. It doesn't matter if it's punctuated. Just get the stories down. Just get the words down, because then you can easily find professionals who can come in and help you bring structure to that book. I just can't I can't stress that enough. It's really all just about starting. I mean, Anita, do you remember the first time you thought, okay, today I'm going to do it? What was that like?
Well, it was kind of like like a new awakening. I remember it like yesterday. It really was. And I didn't hesitate. I thought, okay, in this moment, I've made a commitment to myself that I want to attempt to write a book. And I started putting the actions down on paper and researching. So, does the self-doubt still exist and still talk you out of it the minute you talk yourself into wanting to do something? Absolutely. But it's managing the self-doubt. And again, going back to your why, and that why can become so powerful. It's like that silent, trainer on top of your shoulder. And so when you've got the self-doubt, it's okay to stay there for a little bit, but not for a really long time. Don't let it interfere with your overall goal, and don't second guess yourself. We all do that. No one starts to become an expert best-selling author, but getting started, I really do a lot of interviews, and a lot of people say, what is one of the best values you got out of writing your book? And it's super simple. It's one of the best inner works I've ever done. And I think that alone was just the level of wisdom and confidence, and going back to my why, that this is bigger than me. I've got to say this story. I've got to share. I've got to contribute, will really keep you in that momentum. And that's the key, is to stay in a momentum. I've talked to authors that said it took me 20 years to write a book, and others that's taken 1 year. So no matter how long it is, it doesn't really matter. It's not a race to the finish line. It's really a race against yourself.
Right. Michael, do you remember when you took that first step?
Yeah, but what happened was for me, actually, I was contracted to write a children's book. I had experience in the space because I had written a successful treatment for Disney. And so I was brought on originally to create a children's TV show, but instead my client wanted to write a book. And I remember feeling very daunted by this. I had recently read Stephen King's book on writing, which is extremely helpful. In fact, if anyone wants to know the best book I could recommend about how to write your first book or any book, I would recommend that book. And the first time I wrote was without an outline. And I very much regret that, but it was a good learning experience. It did feel daunting to me, but I can say, because I learned this from reading on writing, that the most important thing is just what you said, Joe, is, and Anita too, is just to get it outside of your head. If you get it outside onto the page, whatever that looks like, whether it's a physical page or onto your computer, then you can edit it. Then you can do something with it. And Stephen King has this idea too, which I very much want to bring up here, which is, when you are producing your book, especially if you're a first-time writer, he calls it your baby. And so he says is, you don't want people to tell you that your baby is ugly. And I very much agree with that. There's a psychic space here where people can interfere. They can distract you from your goal, and criticism can be overwhelming. So I would caution you to be very protective of that baby. And so when you're first putting out that first draft of it, protect that baby. Don't get a lot of people giving you insight and advice. Allow that baby to be strong and to grow, and just get it out of your head, then come back, and then you begin to work on it. But protect it in the beginning, and then it will get stronger and stronger. And then it's time for you to get feedback and to get advice on how to make it even better.
That's great advice. Yeah. I mean, I personally like collaboration. I like to have others' opinions and things, but not prematurely.
Not prematurely. Yeah.
You get it going first.
Exactly.
One last quick thing before we have another great musical break. Anything you guys working on right now that you care to share? I know I've kind of caught you off guard on this, so you can tell me to mind my own business if you'd like.
Well, I can honestly say that my business is writing books for our clients, and so I'm happy to report that right now I'm in the midst of writing 5 different books for clients. I'm doing a sequel. I mentioned that artificial intelligence book. Neil and I, that's my co-author. We're doing a sequel to that book. It's about how to think differently. People always say think differently. That was the slogan for Apple, but no one ever shows you how to do this in business.
Mm-hmm.
The book goes through systematically a structure and approach to think differently. And in the time that we're living in now with COVID and all these other challenges in our lives, we need to know how to think differently so that we can pivot and we can adapt to the current situation.
Right. And Anita?
Yes. Well, we're embarking in a really interesting time, and next week is going to be, a revolutionary week. So I've been asked by different media outlets, and I'll be on another news segment, and wrote another article today for a contributing media publication about election anxiety. So depending on the theme of the climate of what's going on, I like to leverage how my story with transparency and solid techniques and foundations on how we can all move forward very positively and very with lots of personal empowerment while staying in the now. So depending on what's going on in the world as far as the climate and what people are going through, my goal is to always provide value add information to kind of help us, gently navigate forward.
We definitely need lessons on that. That's for sure. Well, you guys stand by. I'm going to go back and talk with Dyad. We heard from them just a little while ago. Niv Ashkenazi and Leigh Cohn. I'd love to hear your story. I understand that you guys met at Juilliard. Tell me about that meeting, and tell me what sparks flew when that meeting happened.
Yeah, we met at Juilliard. It was our last year of our masters, and we started dating soon afterwards. So that's also why we are here together now. And this is an unusual combination, having violin and bassoon I think we may actually.
Why is that? Why is that an unusual combination?
There just isn't as much music written for it. It's not usually instruments that typically people think of pairing together. But what we did is, for the most part, what we were focusing on was playing music that was originally written for this. There's a couple pieces by Paganini and other composers, and then we also commissioned pieces especially for us. And now these days, honestly, we are just kind of enjoying playing music that we enjoy and making our own arrangements, and that's what you're getting to hear today.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Some joyful music.
Great. Well, the stage is yours.
Okay. So this next piece that we're going to play for you guys is Voit che sapete. It comes from The Marriage of Figaro, and it's one of the famous arias in it by Mozart.
They are dyad, and they are wonderful. They said that those compositions are rare, but I think they're going to be referred to as dyad compositions going forward. So let's bring back on Anita and Michael for some final thoughts here. But Michael, I would like you to share something that I think some people who are watching will find of benefit. Mostly what I've done is nonfiction. I know, Anita, you've done sort of memoir nonfiction, and Michael, you've done a lot of nonfiction, but you also have taught fiction. And I think you have, what's it called? Fiction in a Weekend? That sounds ambitious.
Well, you can't write a whole novel in a weekend, Joe?
Try.
What's the matter? Yeah, so I
What can I
teach the
say?
course. What?
I'm a slacker. What can I say?
Right. Yeah, so I teach a course called Fiction in a Weekend, and I also wrote a book around it. And that might be hyperbolic, but the idea behind it is that it's not out of reach to write a novel and to do it quickly. And so I'm a former professor at Chapman University, where I also got my master's in screenwriting. And so I use a lot of the techniques that I learned when it comes to screenwriting, whether it be how to structure using the 3-act structure or the hero's journey, and to help people to understand how to write their novel. And so at the moment, I'm actually helping 3 different individuals write their novel on a range of different subjects. And one thing I didn't mention earlier, but I think it's really important, my tip for people would be this. We often think about writing as something that's more cerebral as opposed to emotional, and we neglect that part of it. But if I think about why people procrastinate, it's because they don't feel good about writing. It can be very daunting, like we said earlier, to get in front of your computer. But if you reward yourself every time that you finish your writing every day, you want to come back to it again and again. And so my solution would be that you make up whatever your quota system is. It could be number of words that you're going to write per day, which is, 2,000 words in one day. It could be number of pages. And when you get it done, you feel amazing. And you reward yourself a small thing, whatever that looks like, and that carries you through to the next day. And I would suggest that's the best way to get through procrastination.
Can I ask you a question? What's harder, fiction or nonfiction?
When I'm working with clients, I'd say fiction is harder because you're usually doing a lot of world building. I worked on a project not too long ago that involved reincarnation, and it involved creating a whole lot of rules for that world. So J.K. Rowling knows this very well. But if you look at something like the world of Harry Potter, there's a lot of internal logic that's involved. There are a lot of characters. There's even a lot of words that she made up. And so when you're creating a novel from scratch, something like especially fantasy or science fiction, there's a lot of that involved, although it's a lot of fun. I generally find that when it comes to nonfiction, it's a little bit easier to create that because it already exists.
Right. Anita, did you ever think about tackling fiction?
Not yet, but Michael's deed and inspiration. So you never know. But I think one of the value adds I can say about being an author, and you both can attest to this, is sometimes, we are kind of thinking in fiction terms when we're writing our stories, because some of the best stories come so lighthearted, you can't take yourself seriously, not at every moment. So when we think that way, I kind of put humor to myself and almost make fun of myself sometimes. So I kind of stay lighthearted and keeping that momentum, as I was saying. So I've had my own kind of fictional thoughts and things like that. So I think that's necessary to be creative.
All right. So we've just got a minute or so left. We've got people out there that are deciding, should I take that step? Shouldn't I take that step? Any sort of final words of thought or encouragement or warning that you want to impart? Anita, why don't you start?
No warnings, except you've got to put in the time. I think, staying on top of a plan as far as implementing the journey of writing a novel or any type of manuscript, no matter how long or short, does involve a good amount of commitment of time. So mine was a couple hours a day for 2 years with maybe 1 or 2 days off. And similar, the approach that Michael said about, putting in the time and then celebrating thereafter. Each page is a celebration when you're really happy with it. But remember, you can't finish something you don't start. And it's not about sometimes finishing, it's about experiencing what you're experiencing along the way. And when you stay true to your why, and you share about yourself or about your purpose or about your work with full transparency, it's your story. And that's what really makes it unique.
Michael?
Sure. My mom was a librarian, and so she shared her love of writing with me when I was very young. And my dad obviously loved writing and reading as well, and so that carried with me my whole life. And I think that it's a wonderful art form And going back to one other person that affected me in my life, my father-in-law said this not too long ago, which is this: we talk all the time, but our words can disappear into the ether. But books last forever. We're still reading things such as the Bible. We're reading Shakespeare, and I think that there's something really special about literature, about book writing, that lasts generations and generations. Eventually, we will all pass one day, but writing gives us a chance at immortality. Those things that we think about, those messages, those concepts, those ideas, people we knew, people we loved, that can live on through the power of words and writing. And it's wonderful to be a part of that tradition.
That's wonderful. Michael, thank you so much. Anita, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm glad you were able to join us today as part of our 4 at 4. And for the fourth person out there, you who are thinking about writing a book, if you're ready to take that first step in writing your book, we're here to help too. I mean, you can reach out to us through People Media or through contacting us directly at our social media, or my website is garnercreative.com. So thank you both for joining us, and thank you everyone. Gary, our engineer, John Lockhart, who is sort of the ringleader that sets all this up. Before we officially say goodbye, though, we're once again going to bring musical director Paul Piazza to tell us more about what's coming up in future weeks. And then we'll get one more song in before we say good evening. Paul?
Thanks, Joe. We are going dark next week, so everyone can focus on their civic duty without being distracted by 4 at 4's amazing content. But on November 12th, we will be back with a bang, hosting the Kids and Families Together Gala. You can see more about all of our upcoming programs, including that program at our website, www.peoplemedia.live. That's www.peoplemedia.live. And if you want to suggest a local band or a musician to feature on 4 at 4 Forums, please visit our Facebook page or our website and send us a message. You can also send us a message if you want to book one of our amazing musicians you've heard for your very own live digital event. Finally, we're going to wrap it up right here, but here's Dyad once again with some uplifting music to remind you that at the end of a spooky Halloween or stressful election season, the sun will still come up. Niv and Leah, take it away.